before we begin our panel, I'd like to invite you just for a 5-second reflection. I would like you to picture in your mind a place in nature that you love. Maybe a waterfall, a mountain, coastline, a river. Now imagine that that place has no rights, no legal protections. It exists only to be exploited. That's the legal reality for almost all of the natural world. And we're going to bring together now to the stage 3 people who are changing this reality, giving legal protections to planet Earth. Let me introduce Jojo Mehta from Stop Ecocide, Adam Weiss from ClientEarth, and Marine Kame from Wild Legal. Okay, welcome. How are you doing? So, we're going to start with a bit of a whirlwind tour of all of your work, short and sharp. I'm going to start with you, Adam. And so you and ClientEarth, key players in environmental litigation, the law to protect life on Earth. I'm also going to share a small quirky fact about each of them to make it lighter. Fact about Adam: despite this work, he's not a nature guy at all. He prefers the concrete jungle of Brussels and is a Frenchman in disguise behind his American accent, which you're going to see in a minute. Adam, share some more about what you're doing with ClientEarth.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here. ClientEarth is an NGO using the power of law to restore balance between people and the planet. We're trying to make a world in which everything every country does and everything every company does can be measured against whether it's compatible with environmental protection. And if it isn't, we can stop it.
Nice. Oh, that was short and sharp, wasn't it? Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. And moving to Marine, and I think when we came in our preparatory call, we realized such amazing synergies between you. So Marine, you and Wild Nature, 100% dedicated to the rights of nature. Personal fact about you, you've planted more trees than any of us will with your hands, especially oaks, your favorite, which you call your sacred link to Earth, and working on some super critical issues right now, including the rights of the River Seine in Paris. Tell us a little more about Wild Legal, how are you doing that, where are you up to at the moment?
So, hi everyone. With Wild Legal, we came to the conclusion that environmental law in France will not be sufficient to meet the ecological challenges of our century, as it reduces nature to natural resources, to ecosystem services, to commodities. And we are tolerating, sometimes even encouraging through law, the destruction of our vital ecosystems. We are encouraging extractive and industrial activities that are fundamentally incompatible with the functioning and the restoration of life. So inspired from the victories in Ecuador, in New Zealand, in Spain, in many other countries in the world, we founded Wild Legal to teach and disseminate the principle of this movement in order to spark a cultural shift, a transition in our legal imagination to reconcile humans and other than humans. So in 2022, we launched a nationwide experimental program to develop and test legal solutions based on rights of nature and in collaboration with pioneers all around France. And on the Seine, you mentioned it, the progress has been really significant because we convinced the city of Paris to follow us, and the city even took a declaration that is now recognizing the Seine as a citizen of the city, and a citizen process is now underway. So this could lead to a legislative acknowledging of the rights of the sand. It's already the case in many other countries. In Ecuador, in Peru, on the Maranon River, in New Zealand on the Wanganui River, on the St. Lawrence in Canada, there is also procedure. So today we are supporting 25 sites of exploration where we organize in a couple of weeks a symposium in the National Assembly in France, where we will present this work to show that things are moving and to prepare our lawmakers, the parliamentary elected people, to the inevitable arrival of this issue on their desk. So, just a word, we must all be ready to change the law, to defend the rights of nature, to defend human rights, which are one and the same fight. So, for the dignity and integrity of our living environment, we have to step up.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I love that, transforming our legal imagination. And if anyone had pictured the Seine as your place in nature, maybe it would have had some rights as a citizen. Okay, Jojo, onto you. Stop Ecocide International, making mass environmental destruction an international crime. And personal fact about you, from a small town in the west of England, Stroud, which is a bit of a seedbed for activism, revolutionary movements. We've had Extinction Rebellion, Stop Ecocide International, and Global Citizens Assembly coming out of Stroud. Something in the water there? I've heard you describe ecocide law as a Swiss Army knife for environmental protection. Tell me what you mean by that. What's your work? How far have you come?
Yeah, I'd actually like to express the complementarity with what Marine talked about with the rights of nature. Because criminal law is the kind of protective complement to the rights sphere. And a really simple way to express that is our basic human right, of course, is the right to life. But what protects our right to life is that if you take it away, that's a crime. It's murder. And ecocide, if you like, is the criminal law that protects the rights of nature, as indeed it protects the human right to a clean and safe environment. And what ecocide law aims to do is to name the very worst harms as serious crimes. And what that does is it helps in that cultural shift that we're talking about, because it creates a level of accountability and a level of seriousness. There are plenty of environmental laws around the world, but there's no real moral stigma in a company breaching a regulation. Indeed, it's often budgeted for. But when you have a serious criminal liability that could actually sit on the shoulders of a director, you have a very, very different level of deterrence. So that gives you a sense of the idea behind it. But to give a very brief sense of where we're at in progressing this law around the world, 5 years ago, there were no governments publicly talking about ecocide law. Now, we have a European Environmental Crime Directive with which all the EU countries will need to harmonize, which criminalizes some conduct comparable to ecocide. It's not perfect, but it's a big step. At the International Criminal Court, there's a multi-state proposal to amend the Rome Statute, which is the governing document of that court, to add ecocide to the list of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression. And there are a number of proposals being taken forward in many countries and that have already been adopted to greater or lesser extents in a number of countries, including France and Belgium. So that just gives you a sense of what our organization is instrumental in propelling. We are not the legislators, but we are the ones that support states to move forward with that legislation and foster the conversation in civil society to create a safe space for those legislators to step into.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much. So obviously a red thread throughout this law that needs to be fit for the planetary crisis. We also, in our preparatory chat, we talked about current laws being written to dominate nature, and that we need laws that place us within nature. What reforms, revolutions do we need, not just in our environmental law, but in how we think about governments, accountability, and rights? Whoever feels the urge? Adam, I can see you look like you have an answer for this.
I do have the urge on this one. What we need is to put the environment at the same level that we put human rights in our constitutions. We need to make sure that it is the fundamental responsibility of states to ensure that there is a planet that we can live on and that future generations can live on. And human rights really is the model here. And Yes was talking about the system that was brought in after the Second World War, which made it possible in so many countries to challenge state action. You can go to court because states are not respecting your rights. If you go to government departments here in France, all across Europe, and many other countries, there are human rights officials who are vetting laws and policies and actions to make sure that they're compatible with our rights, which is exactly what they should be doing for the environment. That's what that law looks like. Our entire economy and society and civilization is embedded in nature. So everything that states do has to be compatible with making sure that nature is still there for us, and the same for companies. And so we're starting to see this, for example, with what's called corporate sustainability due diligence legislation. But basically the idea that we hold companies accountable for making sure they're not having adverse impacts on that natural world in which our entire economy is embedded and in which humans can't survive anymore if it goes away.
I wanted to quote a report that is about transformative changes, because it's not just about law. Law is the fiction, the text, but inside of the law there is a whole imaginary. And it's a report from the IPBES. I'm sure you all know about this, the platform of international experts on biodiversity. It was sent out on December from last year, and it's fascinating because the experts are pointing out that the approaches implemented so far to protect biodiversity have failed to halt or reverse the decline of nature. They say most past and current approaches to conservation aim to reform, but not to transform our existing systems. And yet, transformative changes are defined as a fundamental, system-wide reorganization. So for this, we need law. The report highlights also 3 major challenges that we have to collectively face to tackle the cause of biodiversity loss. One is the disconnection between people and nature, the cultural disconnection. The second is the concentration of power and wealth. And that's exactly what we see, what's happening in the US. In the third one is the prioritization of short-term individual and material gain, because it's incompatible with life. So the rights of nature addressed at least 2 of these challenges. That's very important. The reconnection with nature and the reconstruction of institutions capable of embracing new value systems in pursuit of a life in harmony with nature, a just and sustainable world where all forms of life can thrive.
Okay, thank you. Forceful words, and I think, a lot in common about the disconnect, disharmony between humans and nature, law and nature. You also touched on some of the challenges there. I want to look at another one of those challenges. One thing we mentioned in the intro, Ecuador, New Zealand, many countries adopting rights of nature laws. And this implementation is obviously very different according to the region where it is. In France and Ecuador, for example, how do we make sure, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this first, Jojo, that we aren't looking at this through always a Western lens? How do we decolonize a little this space and international law around it?
That's a really good question. And actually, it's been very interesting to us that the what's happening at the moment in terms of the ecocide law conversation is that we're finding that a lot of countries in Africa and in Latin America are very interested in developing this law. And we can see a couple of reasons for that. One is that it actually depends on the definition. So with your permission, I'll just let you know what the international definition of ecocide is that's been put forward at the International Criminal Court. And it's very concise. It fits on the back of a business card. And if you're dealing with a busy politician, I can't tell you how useful that is. They often don't have time to read a 20-page report. So ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there's a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. Now, actually, if you're familiar with that legal arena, it will be familiar language, but it's also very straightforward language, easy for you or I to understand. But the real point I want to make here is it focuses on consequences. And this is something, or risk of consequences as well, but this is something that people can relate to, I think, very intuitively in the context of criminal law. I'm going to use the murder example again. You're not a murderer because of how you kill someone. You're a murderer because they end up dead. And that is the principle that is in this definition. It's not about specific lists of prohibited acts. It's about how severe the damage is that is created. Now, what is the relevance of this to, the global south, to regions that are still developing? The important thing is what this law is not saying is you are not allowed to do X, Y, or Z. What it is saying is whatever you do, it should not create a severe level of harm. Now, actually, that is a very simple, common sense concept that politicians the world over can understand. It's common sense. I've yet to have anybody say to me, no, that level of harm should not be a crime. I mean, it feels very, very intuitive. But it also creates recourse and accountability for those countries against predatory foreign investment. So that is one of the principal reasons that they're interested. Another reason is actually what they are saying by putting this in place, what they are saying to the world. What they're saying to the world is, we know how to do this safely. And safety is such a fundamental issue now. We've heard again and again about what a dangerous situation that we're in. Ecocide law provides that kind of outer railing, if you like. And those countries are feeling this very acutely. The champions of this law are the, in inverted commas, the victim states. Vanuatu at the front line of climate change, Ukraine at the front line of environmental damage in wartime, Democratic Republic of Congo with one of the biggest rainforests in the world, wanting to protect its biodiversity. So those are some of the thoughts that come in response.
Thank you. So simplicity, universality to an extent with this. Adam, I know you work a lot on ClientEarth with this as well. What would you say?
Absolutely.
Did that resonate?
It resonates really strongly. This question of how to decolonize environmental law is fundamental. And when you think about decolonization, the thing you have to think about first is, how did we get here, and what are the power relations that exist? So Europe is a wealthy place and a powerful place because of a history. And that gives us a situation, an opportunity, a responsibility as we look at the laws in this part of the world going forward to see not only how they take Europeans into that safe space for humanity, that donuts, the Kate Rayworth's idea, where we're no longer outside of our planetary boundaries, but we're also providing a dignified life for everyone. How do we do that not only for ourselves, but given our powerful position here in Europe? How do we do that so it brings the rest of the world with us? We have to stop cleaning up Europe at the expense of other parts of the world, and instead have laws that clean up Europe and clean up the rest of the world at the same time. And that actually means learning from what the legal systems in other parts of the world have to offer. You mentioned some legal systems that have an enormous amount to teach us, and recognizing fundamental, you mentioned universality, a universal legal principle that I see in the Constitution of Ecuador, in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, in the Constitution of China, is this principle of In Europe, we call it environmental integration, that the environment should be integrated into every policy and every law. In China, they call it ecological civilization. In Ecuador, it's called Pachamama, the principle of nature, that is fundamentally the same. And how do we make that operational in our legal systems here to show how it can be operational around the world?
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. And Maureen, I saw you nodding there, so I'm also going to let you come in because this feels like such a critical point.
Yes, because in the rights of nature movement, there are so many forms that the legal model is taking according to different countries, culture, histories, and it's a civil society movement. So it looks like the people who take it as an instrument to have hope for future and to fight with the power of law. And I just wanted to quote the thought of Vandana Shiva on this, because you talk about diversity of cultural system, values, and Vandana Shiva, because she fights for the land, for the people, for the peasants, for the soil, she's saying our actual legal system is a monoculture. It's the same, we harmonize, and so it's fragile because it can be disrupted from the outside. And if the pest or a disease comes, the whole crops are dead. Everything is dead, even the soil. And we need a permacultural legal system that has complexity, diversity, that is resilient, that comes from the outside, from the bottom, from the ground. That's why rights of nature is for me such a force to think about how complexity is not a barrier, not something that is negative, but actually that comes from the inside and that protects us all as a community.
Amazing, thank you. And thinking about law as permaculture. Bet you have not done that before. Thank you. Last bigger question. I mean, Agnes for us painted quite a bleak picture of where we're at in the world right now, and also a truthful picture. We're seeing really, truly concerning political shifts in the US, executive orders, etc. In the EU also, attempts to dilute climate commitments. How can all this work? How can legal structures become resilient against these crazy political pendulum swings? And what role can international law play when national laws are really falling short? Who would like to take that one? Go for it.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, in this landscape, I think, I mean, we're each bringing different aspects of it, but I do think law can provide some hope in this context. With Ecosud law, it's very much about the foundational piece, the sort of setting of the baseline, the moral line, because when it comes down to it, the problem that we face, as Agnes set out, is really a deeply cultural problem, and Maureen's also outlined this. And criminal law has a particular strength as a lever in that arena because it taps into what we consider acceptable and not acceptable. So effectively, when you criminalize something, you're saying, as a culture, we don't accept it. And I think that the point we're coming to now is actually sort of the next big shift. I mean, if you look at the abolition of slavery, you look at votes for women, civil rights, these big shifts that have brought society forward. And I think that the sort of legal shift around the environment is what is this century's version of that. And it happens in a kind of almost I think of it as a crossover, the awareness of the need for that baseline of this is not acceptable, which actually is kind of in our guts already. It has to be at a certain point for the legislators to move on it, but the whole culture doesn't have to be there yet. But once the crime is in place, then because once something is criminal, it has that impact, that sort of cultural moral stigma, if you like, that then spreads across the culture more broadly. So I think we are approaching that point. And I'm just going to give a very tiny story that someone once told me, that a Chinese emperor once commanded a palace to be built that was so big that in the nighttime you couldn't see a candlelight in the middle, and he couldn't do it. And I think that image is lovely because it shows that, it's that thing of always better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And I feel like these aspects of environmental law are those candles.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And great to have that candle and hope amidst the doom. Love the idea that the legal shift for nature could be this century's abolition of slavery. I love the ambition there. And it's on that note that I'd like to wrap us up. I'm going to give you each 1 minute to close for us, 60 seconds each. And I'd like to do something a little different with this close. I would like you to complete this sentence for me. And the sentence will be, future generations will thank us if our legal systems ... What they do, what they become, you choose how to interpret that. Adam, kick us off.
Future generations will thank us if our legal system solves this crisis and tells them how to prevent it coming back. The law is a really powerful tool for passing on wisdom to future generations about how to deal with society's, humanity's biggest problems. And as Jojo said so eloquently, this is our biggest problem. We use the wisdom of past generations in our laws to deal with our most significant problems. We now have to pass this on to the people who will be here hundreds of years from now.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah. Maureen.
Much shorter. Future generation will thank us if the law system is capable of weaving new alliances with other than humans. And I think that's the most important cultural shift we have to face in the next coming years.
Thank you, Maureen.
And very simple for me as well. Future generations will thank us if the legal systems acknowledge that mass damage to the living world, to people and to the ecosystems that sustain us, is simply not acceptable. That will be looked back on as a kind of no-brainer. Why on earth did it take them that long?
Yes, thank you. That is the courage, the ambition that we need to make this shift. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the perspectives. Thanks. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh.